As the cliche goes, April showers bring May flowers. But usually what comes after is the heat and dryness of summer. Hello again, Essay here. And before the hot weather of the holiday shows up, you should indulge in my new short story, The White Cat, a free exclusive on Substack. The links are down below in description. Join Margot Thompson, a beautiful stage actress and recent widow who finds salvation in the form of a white cat during a night of terror. While checking out my oddball thriller, remember that my Glitch series is still available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. The links are down below in the description. While you'll find my peculiar story about a white pussy entertaining, that doesn't mean I'm out of ideas. I still have more stories coming down the pike, so as long as I don't run into any mishaps, you'll see those stories as well. Now let's get back to the video. Hello again. Essay here. There's been a phrase floating around for a while now that says, telling the truth during a time of deceit or universal deceit is a revolutionary act. Now, of course, some of you smart cookies out there probably think, oh, that's a Orwellian term. No. Nope. A lot of people think it was Orwell, but that's not true. No, I did my a little homework, and apparently that phrase first appeared back in the 80s. It was in a book written by some Italian fella, Venaturi. Yeah, he wrote this book called Partners in Ecocide, and he wrote that, and then he claimed it was Orwell who wrote it, but it wasn't true. So where did he hear it from? No one knows. But I continued to do some homework, and I found a similar phrase that basically says to tell the truth and arrive together at the truth is a communist and revolutionary act. And the person who wrote that, no, wasn't Lenin. It was some fellow called Gramercy. I think I'm pronouncing his name right, but another Italian. And it appeared in an Italian newspaper called The New Order back in 1919. So, there you go. But I like that phrase. Even though the person who said it, is wrong, or should say contribute to is wrong, I like that phrase. I'm going with it. So what does that really mean in English? I guess it means that if people basically are surrounded by lies and deceit, and then you say, no, I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to go along with the lie, I'm going to tell the truth, then you could say it is a revolutionary act. Indeed, anyone who remembers the emperor's new clothes probably remembers what happened in that story. Yeah, the emperor was told by some flim-flam man that he had some incredible suit that was so incredible that nobody can see it, including the emperor. And he convinced the emperor to put on the suit, except it didn't exist. And then, of course, the emperor went around in the suit. Except everyone who didn't want to offend the emperor said, oh, nice suit, even though everyone all could see was the emperor's backside. And then what happens? You remember the story, right? Some little kid says, why is the emperor walking around naked? Yeah, a revolutionary act. Everyone was standing around lying to the guy, and so one little kid said, "Wait a second, this guy ain't wearing no clothes. This guy walking around with his wing hanging out." Yeah. Well, the thing is, occasionally people who do tell the truth, usually things don't turn out well to them. Especially people prefer to lie over the truth. Indeed, I remember back in the '80s. I remember reading this book, or read the Cliff Note version. It was called "The Bright Shiny Lie," and it was written. I forgot who wrote it, but it was written about this guy. I think he was a colonel during Vietnam, and he supposedly told the truth about what was going on in Vietnam back when telling the truth was basically not allowed. And the guy actually was on the ground, in Southeast Asia. He knew what was going on, and he was constantly not holding his tongue. He was telling everyone who would listen, whether it be McNamara, LBJ, his immediate commanders like Westmoreland, that hey, this deal we got ourselves in is not what we think it is. And what did people think it was? Oh, they thought it was some kind of communist infiltration and some kind of grand master plan for the dreaded commies. And he said, no, we got ourselves in the middle of a damn civil war between people who just happen to be communists up in Hanoi and people who are definitely not democratic down there in Saigon. And he was basically ignored, but because the guy was a good officer, they didn't fire him. And according to the book, the guy actually got killed in a helicopter crash. I think it was like 1969, 1970. But anyway, this video is not about dead American soldiers in Vietnam or long dead Italian communists. No, this video is about an incident that happened recently where a musician, a singer, basically humiliated one of the most powerful American politicians around. And I ain't talking about idiot Joe Biden. Okay, so now Dr. Steve Turley just happened to have this video. Okay, now I'm going to show it to you, and you can see for yourself. Okay, are you ready? Here we go.
You may be thinking now that Trump is a populist. You are right. He didn't accept the 2020 elections, and he should have. So should Hillary in 2016, so should Brussels, and so should Westminster in 2016, and so too should Congresswoman Pelosi, instead of saying the 2016 election was, quote, hijacked. Quote, hijacked. Thank you.
Nancy Pelosi gets humiliated at an Oxford debate by a banjo player, no less, who stood up and faithfully defended the worldwide populist revolt in the face of one of the most corrupt politicians on the planet. I'm Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor, and we're going to get a front row seat for one of the most brutal takedowns of Pelosi yet. So make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let's dive right in. So if you don't know, Winston Marshall, the former banjoist for the band Mumford & Sons, faced off with Nancy Pelosi at the Oxford Student Union debate on whether populism was a threat to democracy. And let's just say Pelosi was totally out of her league.
To me, populism is not a dirty word. Since the 2008 crash, and specifically the $1 trillion Wall Street bailout, we are in the populist age. And for good reason. The elites have failed. Populism, as you know, is the politics of the ordinary people against an elite. Populism is not a threat to democracy. Populism is democracy. And why else have universal suffrage if not to keep elites in check?
All right, so there's so much good there. You'll notice that Winston said that since 2008, we are in what he called the populist age. And he's right. Even the left-wing Guardian is admitting that. We are living in the midst of a rising populist revolt. And he did a very good job in defining populism. The key characteristic of populism is a distinctly vertical political antagonism as opposed to a horizontal one. So instead of polarizing politics horizontally, right, seeing the political animus as between left versus right or liberal versus conservative, this horizontal antagonism gets reconfigured vertically. Now the animus is between the people versus the political class, the ruled versus the rulers, the ordinary American, right, versus the oligarchy. And so ironically, far from being opposed to democracy, populism, as Winston rightly pointed out, is democracy. It's the literal outworking of the rule of the demos, the people, as opposed to a corrupt oligarchical elite like Nancy Pelosi.
Given the success of Trump, and more recently Javier Milei taking a chainsaw to the state behemoth of Argentina's bureaucratic monster, you'd be mistaken for thinking this was a right-wing populist age. But that would be ignoring Occupy Wall Street. That would be ignoring Jeremy Corbyn's for the many, not the few. That would be ignoring Bernie against the billionaires, RFK Jr. against Big Pharma, and more recently, George Galloway against his better judgment. Now, all of them, including Galloway, recognize genuine concerns of ordinary people being otherwise ignored by the establishment. I'm actually rather surprised that our esteemed opposition, Congressman Pelosi, is on that side of the motion. I thought the left was supposed to be anti-elite. I thought the left was supposed to be anti-establishment. Today, particularly in America, the globalist left have become the establishment. I suppose for Ms. Pelosi to have taken this side of the motion, she'd be arguing herself out of a job.
That was good. And again, he's absolutely right from two vantage points here. First, you'll notice because populism is more of a structuring of politics, of reconfiguring politics away from a horizontal animus and more around a vertical divide, the people versus the elite. Populism transcends the traditional left versus right binary. So that's why you have populists of both political stripes, populists on the left, populists on the right, because they both share a common enemy, the corrupt elite. Populists have the unique capacity to unite in a way the traditional left and right simply couldn't, given their horizontal animosity. But you'll notice something else he pointed out there, and that's how the establishment left is now an intrinsic part of the aristocratic elite. It's part of a social order that Joel Kotkin of Chapman University profoundly describes as re-feudalization. It's a term that refers to the ways in which the structure of our society is increasingly reflecting the kind of caste system that characterized the feudal Middle Ages. So, for example, today, like then, you have an astonishing concentration of wealth and power in the hands of very, very few. So 5 years ago, 400 billionaires owned half the world's assets. But today, that number's dropped to just 100 billionaires. But next to that, we're seeing today the rise of a comparable kind of religious fundamentalism. But of course, the fundamentalism we see today is the insidious form of what's technically referred to as cultural socialism, what we more commonly refer to as wokeness. And like with all forms of religious fundamentalism, the key characteristic of wokeness is the total and complete intolerance of any and all forms of dissent. Dissenters are heretics, and heretics must by definition be excommunicated, hence the role of cancel culture. So Winston is absolutely right. The far left are now the ruling elites who use their power and affluence to protect their privileged position in this new corrupt caste system. And by the way,
the Hong Konger populist revolt is literally called the pro-democracy movement. The farmer revolts from Netherlands to Germany, France, Greece to Sri Lanka. Farmers are taking their tractors to the road to protest ESG policy that's floated down to us from those all-knowing, infallible elites of Davos. The trucker movement in Canada became anti-elitist when petty tyrant Prime Minister Justin Trudeau froze their bank accounts, not the behavior of a democratic head of state. The Gilets jaunes in France, ULEZ in London, working people protesting policy that hurt them. And how are they treated? They're called conspiracy theorists. They're called far right by the mayor as well. Ladies and gentlemen, populism is the voice of the voiceless. The real threat to democracy is from the elites. Now, don't get me wrong. We need elites. If President Biden has shown us anything, we need someone to run the countries. When the president has severe dementia, it's not just America that crumbles, the whole world burns. But let's examine the elites. European corporations spend over 1 billion euros a year lobbying Brussels. US corporations spend over $2 billion a year lobbying in DC. 2/3 of Congress receive funding from pharmaceutical companies. Pfizer alone spent $11 million in 2021. They made over $10 billion in profit. No wonder then that 66% of Americans think the economy is rigged against them for the rich and the powerful. And by the way, we used to have a word for when big business and big government were in cahoots. And I think any students here of early 20th century Italian history know what I'm talking about.
All right, that was absolutely brilliant. Okay, this whole notion that populism is somehow anti-democratic is the very definition of projection. It's the very definition of projecting onto others the very sins that the corrupt elite are themselves committing. In fact, what Winston is spelling out there for us is a billionaire bureaucrat alliance that is in point of fact producing what British scholar Colin Crouch calls post-democratic sentiments. In other words, we still have elections, we still have campaigns, debates, and the like, but no one really believes in it anymore. The vast majority of the population no longer trusts the so-called democratic system or its institutions because no matter how they vote, nothing ever changes. The elites always seem to get everything they want, and the will of the people always ends up dismissed and derided. That's what's called post-democracy sentiment, and it's every bit a product of the rule of our current elite.
Let me read you some mainstream media headlines. The New Yorker, the day before the 2016 election. The case against democracy. The Washington Post, the day after the election. The problem with our government is democracy. The LA Times, June 2017. The British election is a reminder of the perils of too much democracy. Vox, June 2017. The two eminent political scientists say the problem with democracy is voters. New York Times, June 2017. The problem with participatory democracy is the participants. Mainstream media elites are part of a class who don't just disdain populism, they disdain the people. If the Democrats had put half their energy into delivering for the people, Trump wouldn't even have a chance in 2024. He shouldn't have a chance. You've had power for 4 years. From the fabricated Steele dossier to trying to take him off the ballot in both Maine and Colorado, the Democrats are the anti-Democrat party. All we need now is the Republicans to come out as the pro-monarchist party. Ladies and gentlemen, populism is not a threat to democracy, but I'll tell you what is. It's elites ordering social media to censor political opponents. It's police shutting down dissenters, be it anti-monarchists in this country or gender-critical voices here, or last week in Brussels, the National Conservative movement. I'll tell you what is a threat to democracy. It's Brussels, DC, Westminster, the mainstream media, big tech, big pharma, corporate collusion, and the Davos cronies. The threat to democracy comes from those who write off ordinary people as deplorable. The threat to democracy comes from those who smear working people as racists, The threat to democracy comes from those who write off working people as populists. And I'll say one last thing. This populist age can be brought to an end at the snap of a finger. All that needs to be done is for elites to start listening to, respecting, and, God forbid, working for ordinary people. Thank you.
Okay, you saw that, right? Have to admit, for a guy who's just an old banjo picking player, apparently he has more than 2 brain cells to rub together. And of course, I like that little bit where when he called out Pelosi, who just had to be in the audience. She's sitting there with her dried up self saying no, 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 and I'm thinking, oh, shut up, Pelosi, go over there and count your husband's money, you old skank. Yeah. And the stupid thing is, these people, these elitists, these globalists, these people who don't give a damn except for 3 things: me, myself, and I. And I guess if you count their ill-gotten gains, I guess that would be 4 things. But these people have been paid, basically pulling the wool over people's eyes almost like a solid 20 years. If I go a little bit further, I go back into the 90s. Because I remember right after the Cold War ended, there was this brief period of optimism. And there was people, I think you probably remember, I remember, where old Bush 41 was talking about a new world order. Yeah. And people thought, oh, everyone was going to sing, and everyone was going to sit there and hug and kiss each other and sing Kumbaya. But of course, as we all know, when old Bushy was talking about a new world order, yeah, he was basically talking about that famous line in that old Who song. I think, what was it called? We Won't Get Fooled Again. Yeah. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Yeah, because that was also around the same time that the EU got into full swing. And anyone who's familiar with Nigel Farage, yeah, Mr. Brexit himself, will tell you the EU has basically become the Soviet Union 2.0. And the Soviet Union was definitely not Disneyland. I mean, ask anyone who's lived through it, and they say, yeah, being in Soviet Russia was not even Busch Gardens. I mean, the place was just miserable, even for the people on the top of the heap. Because if you were denounced or ended up crossing paths with the wrong commissar, you can end up in the gulag if you're lucky. And indeed, when you look how the EU has evolved, it's basically become the Soviet Union. Only difference is they claim that, oh, we're basically not communists, we're globalists. And what the hell does that mean in English? Well, it basically means that we basically want to reform the world in our image. Problem is, their idea of the world, anyone who's been to Davos, or at least saw some of the speeches coming out of Davos, their vision for the world is pretty horrific. Because anyone who remembers some of the really bad stuff that came out of the Soviet Union, and wait for it, communist China, and they can't forget Pol Pot down there in Cambodia, they had a habit of killing lots of people. And indeed, some of these damn people, these globalists, they're not even hiding it. I mean, how many times have you heard how they complain about, oh, the world is global warming and global, was that clown who's currently the General Secretary of the United Nations, global boiling? What the hell that means? Yeah, I'll give you some global boiling, you knucklehead. And in the meantime, they say, well, how we stop it? And of course, some of you probably familiar about the Paris Climate Change Whatever Act. Yeah. And too many smart people said, oh, yeah, if you get rid of all the cars, they ain't going to do a hill of beans because, according to your estimations, the global mean temperature will only drop not even maybe 1 degree. And now these people are talking about, oh, we have to cull the human population. Now you say, what the fuck does that mean? Well, it basically means they want to basically drop the human population down to a manageable number. And of course, some of you say, wait, what? Yeah. And they say it publicly amongst themselves, of course. And of course, the stupid thing about these globalists is they usually film themselves saying these things. And they put it up on damn social media where people can see it. And then they realize, I should have put that in my account on private. And before they realize it, that damn stupid video where they talk about wanting to decrease the world population down to about less than 1 billion. Everyone in the world sees that video, along with subtitles, so everyone knows exactly what they're saying. And then they say, whoopsie. But yeah. And then you say, so these globalists are basically a bunch of genocidal SOBs. Yeah, but that's only the half of it. Because when you come to master plans and master schemes, too many smart people know what these globalists are really all about. It's all about basically control. In other words, and of course, the whole damn global greenhouse climate, whatever, it's just a means to an end. They basically want to get rid of people's ability to make their own choices and to make sure that they control the population. They want to get rid of as many people as possible. And then, of course, when they get rid of most of the people, the ones that are left, they'll be easier to control, to corral, and basically, treat like a bunch of sheep. And then you say, well, what will be the purpose of that? Simple. Megalomaniac. That's all. That's it. That's their alpha and omega. They're all basically about control. They're all basically about power to control people, power to rule over them, power to be basically master, and you becoming the servant. That's it. But as more and more people see these clowns and see what they're all about, looks like their master plan ain't gonna work out, because people are people. And doesn't matter if you're a prince or a pauper, or basically a shoeshine boy, or a guy who works at Nike. People don't want to end up on the rock pile. People don't want to be cold. And people definitely don't want to have, as George Orwell really did say once, have a boot stamping on their face forever. Yeah, Orwell actually did say that. He said differently. He said that, I think it was in 1984. He said that dictatorship is basically a boot stamping on a human face forever. And that's what these globalists are about. They're basically want their boot stomping on your face forever. Or at least the ones that they'll leave alive, of course. But hey, the more people know what they're about, the less likelihood they're not going to win. That they're not going to get their egomaniac empire that they want to turn the earth into. Except it won't be an egomaniac empire, be more like an egomaniac nightmare. Sort of like what happened in Pol Pot's Cambodia on steroids. Because that's what they did. Yeah. And anyone who's unfamiliar with the killing fields, yeah, well, you can look at the movie version or the book version. I saw both. Right, okay, I skimmed through the book and I saw the film afterwards. Yeah. Those clowns weren't playing around. They weren't joking. And these globalists, same thing. These people ain't playing around, they ain't joking. The only difference is they're going to try to quietly walk you down the primrose path to oblivion, while those old Marxists, they just put a bullet, they just march you up against the wall and put a bullet in the back of your head. But in the end, it all leads to the same thing. You basically the slave, and these people are the masters. That's it. Well, that's all I'm gonna say about that banjo picking man. Basically, fighting the power, fighting the good fight, and telling these globalists and these elitists where to basically blow it out their asses. That's my opinion.